Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. We have so much to share with you all today. Welcome, everyone. My name is Suzanne Boyd. I'm the founder and CEO at Anthro-Tech. And at Anthro-Tech, we specialize in helping government organizations create digital experiences that are easy to use. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to be talking about connected government. So what exactly do we mean by connected government? Well, I'd love to start with an example from the private sector. Think for a moment about your online banking app. I don't know about you, but for me, once I log in, I'm into the app, I can transfer bills, I apply for a loan, I can pay bills, and behind the scenes, all of those services are very often supported by different systems and sometimes even different business units, but you'd never know it. It just works, right? Now compare that to government. More often than not in government, a simple goal like renewing your passport or applying for unemployment benefits requires that we deal with disparate and redundant channels and touch points. You might have to go to one website to sort of learn the how-to information, another to fill out a form, another to set up an account, to apply, check on your status, whatnot. And very often we are entering the same information over and over and over again. And that can be super frustrating. It erodes trust. It gives us in government a bad rep. People shouldn't have to understand how government is organized to get something done. So that's the opportunity in front of us with connected government, right? Digital transformation isn't about putting services online. It's about reducing the work people have to do to access those services. Today, we are joined by two researchers from Portland State University Center for Public Service. We have Jillian Girard and Carl Christensen. And Jillian and Carl have studied how people in Oregon, specifically from business owners to rural communities, experience government and what they believe needs to change. And I would love to start with some introductions from our panel. And Jillian, if you could get us started here, give us a brief intro. Who are you? What do you do? How does it relate to connected government?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, and hi, everybody on the call. Excited to be here today. Jillian Girard, and I am a senior fellow at the Center for Public Service at Portland State University. And one of the things the Center for Public Service does is consulting, primarily public sector consulting. And for the past 5 years, as part of that consulting work, we've been seeking to understand how communities experience online services with the state of Oregon and really working in that e-government sector. So, how governments are interacting online with the communities they serve.
Thank you, Jillian. Thanks for being here today. We look forward to learning from you. Let's hear from you, Carl.
Yeah, hello. I'm Carl Christensen. I'm a recent doctoral graduate of Portland State. And for the last several years, I've been working with Jillian and the Center for Public Service on this e-government project.
Thank you for joining, Carl, and congrats on your
Thank
doctorate.
you.
A huge milestone. For everyone just joining, I'm Suzanne Boyd. I'm the founder and CEO at Anthro-Tech, and I'll be your webinar host and facilitator today. Before we get started, quick little housekeeping item. If you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A button. Please, put your questions in there throughout today's webinar. We are leaving about 15 minutes at the end of the webinar to go over your questions, and I always find that that's the most interesting part of the webinar is getting those questions going and getting a conversation. So before we start, we'd love to see who's in the room. So we're going to do a quick audience poll. If you look at the screen here, I'll read the question. On a scale of 1 to 4, where's your organization today in creating a seamless, connected experience for customers? Is it 1, customers navigate government agency by agency, or perhaps even division by division? Customers can complete tasks within one agency. customers can complete some tasks across agencies, or your advanced, customers can complete cross-agency tasks in one place. Let's see where we're all at. Okay, well, the majority of us are still in a place where the experience we put out means customers are navigating government agency by government agency, so still fairly siloed. But we do have one person in the room. Customers can complete cross-agency tasks in one place. Well, congratulations, that's amazing. Fantastic. Well, let's dig in and talk about the research. I'd love to start with you, Carl, on a little bit of background. I know you talked with a lot of folks in Oregon, but tell us a little bit more about how you reached those folks. Were you out hitting the streets? How did you collect your data, basically?
Yeah, it was a very mixed methods approach. We did a little bit of everything. We did widespread surveys, we interviewed people, we held focus groups. We really just tried to learn from as many different people and perspectives as possible. And at this point in the project, we've really heard from thousands of Oregonians, and in many different ways, as I mentioned. From some, we learned about broad patterns of use, interacting with e-government. Whereas other times in this project, we really zoomed in on one kind of perspective and really tried to get in depth with a certain group of Oregonians. And so we talked about individuals, their experience, and yeah, saw especially how the business community interacted with the online platform and how a variety of different Oregonians of different backgrounds interacted to see if there was any kind of barriers they might be facing.
Amazing. So various different ways to reach them, and it sounds like you had different focus points for different audiences over time.
Mhm.
So Jillian, can you kind of walk us through the broader program and then maybe pivot to what did you learn from the research? What are some of the key insights?
Yeah, absolutely. We're just starting out our fifth phase. So we have four phases completed, and I'll just share a little bit about those past phases. So we've done one a year. So this goes back to 2022. And really, we started out just trying to understand at a very broad level what is happening. How are people accessing the online resources? What's the use patterns? And where are we seeing barriers? So it's very broad. And then based on that information, we identified different groups that were having different experiences and we were seeing different barriers. And so the following year in 2023, we did a really in-depth qualitative, meaning focus groups and interviews with communities of color and people who regularly use a language other than English. And so that really allowed us to go deep with that community. And then another pattern where we saw differences in how they were using the website, what resources they might need, was around the business community. And we talked to a lot of really small businesses, large businesses, and a big range of different types of businesses. And so the second and for sort of follow up in 2024 was that in depth with the business community. And then finally, the other group that we saw a lot of differences in terms of use patterns, barriers, was in the rural communities. And so most recently, last year, we did mixed methods. So both surveys as well as in-depth conversations with people living in rural areas. So really sort of that broad understanding to give us a baseline, a benchmark, and then we got to go in depth with specific groups.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think,
So a very diverse group of folks that you all talked with. I'm curious, what were some of the key takeaways from all of these years of research, and was there anything that surprised you?
yeah, absolutely. What surprised me the most, I'd say, is not what was really different, but the theme of navigation. The theme of navigating these resources came up again and again and again across all of these groups. So it really started to become sort of a central interest of mine. But what differed, of course, was why people struggled and what kind of support they needed. And so we did what's called a cluster analysis. I'm not going to get into the stats of that, but really what it looked at was patterns of responses. So we're looking for distinct patterns of experiences. And there were four sort of primary patterns that we saw in the data. The first was active service users. These are people that are engaged with multiple agencies. This is for personal use. And one of the things we heard from them was just having to repeat the same information over and over again. We also had a group of active business users. And one thing that I think was kind of interesting about them was only 8% said they were easily able to find the information they needed. So finding the information they needed was a really big theme for that group. One user told us that he knew he had to complete a task. He went online, he tried to figure it out for his specific situation, and wasn't able to do it correctly. He didn't think. So he was just waiting for a penalty letter to show up in the mail to tell him what to do. And so just knew that something needed to be done, couldn't figure out how to do it. And this is an active user. He's using these agency websites regularly. Then we had two groups of non-users. So there was one group that had sort of a trust barrier. So that might be trust in data sharing, what's going to happen to my data once I'm on here, online security, and could also be sort of general distrust of government or online resources, those types of things. So a variety of different trust barriers, but one thing that we heard from them was it was particularly challenging when they'd be on one agency website and they would assess the security of it, feel comfortable, and then move to a new agency and everything looked different. The interface was quite a bit different. And so then they felt like they had to reassess all over again. And then the last non-user group was people that were just experiencing access barriers. So that might be language barriers. It might be the language they wanted to navigate in wasn't available, misinterpretations, but it could also be things like reading level, technical jargon. And then particularly in rural communities, we heard around internet speed and reliability concerns. So a number of access barriers that were preventing people from engaging.
Yeah, this definitely resonates with me and my team. I think we've done a lot of research across different states. This whole theme of navigation and having to go multiple places to either be compliant or get the information that you need, like the example of a business person where I know folks have to go to multiple places to file taxes. They can't just do it in one sitting. And what really resonates with me, based on these barriers that you shared, Jillian, is that it seems like they never just exist on their own, right? Like people are experiencing multiple barriers at the same time. If you only face one, you can probably overcome, but when they stack up, they create so much friction that someone can't get the information they need or can't access the benefits that they deserve. Did your research have a similar pattern like that? What happens when barriers start to kind of stack up onto each other?
Yeah, absolutely. We did find that the barrier is certainly compounded. So if we take sort of a simple life moment, like I'm moving, I'm changing addresses. Um, Me as the end user, I just want to tell the state of Oregon, here's my new address, here's where to find me. But instead, if we're navigating online, I need to know not only the variety of different agencies that might need my updated address, but I need to know the search terms to be able to get to the page to update my address. So that already we've taken one life event, I'm moving, and already now it's spread across multiple agencies, let's say Department of Motor Vehicles or DOL, revenue, updating my voter registration. Maybe I'm collecting some sort of benefit that needs a address update. So already this one task has sort of ballooned. But then now imagine my internet's unreliable. So everything is slowed down, adding more frustration and complexity. And then let's say also one of the findings was around mobile users. One of the things that I found interesting in our research is that a lot of older individuals had left the workforce. They were no longer regularly using their computer. And so, they made a financial decision. They said, I don't need a phone and a computer. My phone does most of what a computer does these days. So I'm going to get rid of my computer. I'm only going to exist on this mobile platform. So now I'm trying to navigate all of these different agencies, trying to identify what agencies I need, what search terms I need. My internet's maybe unreliable or slow, and I'm doing it all on my phone. So it becomes really frustrating. And of course, what happens is people give up.
They give up, and that's very unfortunate. And I think part of the reason is because, we're not always designing for a specific journey when that journey can only be accomplished if different agencies are creating that seamless experience across the silos of government. I know that we've come a long way in terms of digitizing services, especially during COVID, when we couldn't necessarily go into a driver's license office to get our license renewed. So we saw a lot of services come online, a lot of transactions, and so on. But what we've seen working with state agencies is that just digitizing an individual service doesn't automatically create a connected and seamless experience. And Carl, I know you've done research on that, and it helps explain why it can still feel very fragmented for residents. Could you share with us the e-government maturity model that you shared with me the other day, and talk a little bit more about why people get stuck sort of in the middle there, people being government organizations?
Yeah, well, as we've talked about, e-government is still developing. It's still a developing field in practice, and scholarship is still kind of studying it and thinking about where it's going. And what we found during this project the limitation in Oregon right now might not be technical, might not be a design problem so much as it is a structural issue resulting from larger government operations and policy choices. Because we found in Oregon that each agency has autonomy in developing their e-government services, which creates both technical and authority barriers for this connected e-government we're talking about. And as e-government services have developed and increased in complexity, more and more cooperation and coordination is required from different levels of government and even inside one level of government. We really found Lane and Lee's model of e-government development useful in understanding where Oregon is at. And this model, is from 2001, but I think it pretty well fits how e-government development has progressed. It predicted that the first stage of e-government development will be catalog and require just one actor, and this is one-way communication from a government agency putting information online. That's just like sharing their office hours, a phone number, addresses, that kind of basic information. It's online, anyone can access it. So it's very simple communication. The next step is this transactional place, and this is where a lot of states are already at. A lot of agencies have already accomplished this mandate of having forms online. Two actors can interact. If you go looking for something, the government actor can give it to you, you can send it back all online. So that's largely been accomplished, but these next two stages require more actors and more coordination. Vertical stage is now when governments of different levels, so think national, state, and local municipalities within a service area can all interact. So if you need, you're starting a business and you have tax information, you can have your local taxes, share that information with the IRS, and they can all understand what your business is there online. And some states and some service areas are much better at vertical integration. Some are still growing. And then this final stage of horizontal, this is sort of the idealized, most interconnected. And this is where services are organized around need, and one interaction with a level can touch on every relevant agency. So this is that example Jillian had of, well, if I just want to move, I just go to the moving service and it can talk to all relevant agencies. And there are some examples of this happening now. We mentioned voter registration, and I know every time in any state I've gone to get a new license, they make it very easy. They ask me if I want to register to vote. If I give that affirmative answer, they send that same information over to the auditor, registrar, whoever. So that's really convenient from my end. I didn't have to seek out that interaction. And it would be great if that could be the same way for every government service.
Yeah, and I see you've got a little marker there. Where would you describe Oregon as at?
Yeah, and we think they have the transactional down. All the different services are online and you can send forms. But getting that vertical and horizontal aren't quite there yet. And that really came out in the experiences from our participants. Sometimes people just said, it's too difficult to remember logins, it's too difficult to find the right place. I just want a phone number and a person will explain what to do from there.
Yeah, so we've digitized some of the government services, but we haven't necessarily connected them. Yeah. So here, I'd love to just hear where our audience is at to get an understanding of what some of the barriers are that you are all experiencing to creating this seamless, connected experience for your residents. So the question here is, what's getting in the way of connecting digital services at your organization? The lack of integration, the systems aren't working together. Is it politics and silos? Agencies won't work together. Is it limited customer insight? We need a better understanding of the resident needs and their journeys. Or does it have to do with staff capacity? There's just not enough people or not the right skill set in the organization. Curious to see where we're going to land. All right. Politics and silos. That sounds familiar, and it's actually a great segue to something that's coming up a little later in the webinar here, which is working together in collaboration and getting out of silos is a key to starting to build connected government. Jillian, I know you talked a little bit about the hurdles that folks expressed in terms of having a great experience. Did they come with any ideas for how to improve experiences or what they might expect from government in terms of customer experience quality?
Absolutely. People we talked to had a lot of different and wonderful ideas. I'll share with you just some of the things that came up a little bit more frequently. So really, what are people asking for? Moving more into this sort of horizontal or vertical integration. And really, they're not super technical solutions, I would say. So this is a great slide to screenshot if you want. It has a lot of the different sort of items that people are asking for. So the first one was single sign-on. We heard repeatedly how frustrating it was to have to remember multiple passwords for what people perceive as the same entity. So even though it's different agencies, they're thinking about it as one state government. And we also talked to librarians and in libraries across the state, and they said one of the things that people come in the most and ask for help with is resetting their password. And so this single sign-on would reduce barriers for people, but also just make their life easier. Mobile first, we talked about this already in terms of how people are moving more and more to using their cell phone and maybe don't have access to a computer. And so having it as a mobile first design was really important. Sharing data, this one's a little bit tricky. So this would be what we've talked about. Let's say I'm changing my address. It'd be great if I could just say, hey, state, I am changing my address. That might go to my local government. It could go to the federal. Maybe I can just do it once. That would be very easy on my end. Of course, we want to be careful with the information we're sharing. And this was particularly a concern for those non-users due to trust. They were worried about what was going to happen to their data. And so it's really important for not only data sharing to be available, but for people to be able to control where their data goes. So that question, do you want to sign up for voter registration when you're changing your license, for example? Other information like protected health information, maybe you don't want to go as broad. Accessibility, people, this was brought up in a number of ways. It was brought up by people that were having accessibility concerns, maybe due to a disability or language access. They wanted more plain language. But accessibility was also brought up as sort of a community value. People really valued the idea that websites would be accessible for everybody in their community. And so it was brought up as a value in addition to people wanting to be able to navigate the websites more easily. Plain language might be the importance of not having technical jargon. So when people are filling out forms, they might come across a term that they don't know. Do you want to select this option or this option? You're starting a business and you don't know the language that it's like S Corp or C Corp. I don't even know what those means. And so they're having to navigate away from the form they're filling out, do all this research, go back to the form, hope it didn't time out. If it did time out, hope it's saved somehow. And so people talked about things like just having pop-ups on form to explain different options. Integrated dashboards could be for citizens, but also just community members. There's visitors that visit the websites, but people had talked about, I just want one place to go and I want it to list everything I'm supposed to do. If I am moving, I need to talk to these agencies and it directs me to the right place. And then, of course, accountability and transparency. If I am providing you data, where is that going? So all of those are really important to folks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great list of what I would say sort of practical asks or needs. Like people aren't asking for bells and whistles or the next innovation or breakthrough. They're really asking for basic things that would improve their experience and that would, respect their time when interacting with government. So thank you for sharing these. I'm curious to learn a little bit more from you, Carl. Um, why is it so challenging to create these connected experiences or even to meet these basic needs of plain talk, digital accessibility, mobile first?
Yeah, and I think as the poll showed, a lot of the audience even recognized that there's political barriers and authority barriers to having this more connected e-government experience. And I think that really comes at issue in our model. A government agency might have only been tasked with, getting to that transactional stage. Like your mandate is to put your forms online, be able to collect information from residents. Great. So from their perspective, they've accomplished that. And they need a new mandate to go further. So that requires political will. Someone needs to be interested in improving e-government. It'll also require someone telling the agencies to work together from disparate areas, and there might be some kind of authority sharing of different service areas. And those issues really can't be solved by the agency themselves or the administrative branch at all. That's a legislative issue. And they have to have that new mandate, that new mission for this if that's what the state is interested in. And then Jillian touched on it too with the privacy, and there might actually be really good, thoughtful reasons to not interconnect as much. There's, the more if it's one sign-on and that gets compromised, now all of your accounts are compromised. Similarly, if an agency shares all of its data with all the other agencies, if now there's a dispute between different government actors or a malicious outside third actor, it just could open it up to so much more vulnerability. So it's not perhaps an obvious answer or a simple one without its challenges to create this more interconnected e-government. So it certainly shouldn't be approached kind of overly optimistically and enthusiastically without considering the challenges too.
Yeah, 100%. And what's missing from your list is technology. You're not saying that that's the barrier at all. There are more systemic issues around governance,
Right.
sharing, working together. And I would add to that, having a really clear vision of what good looks
Mm,
like for residents. And I shout out to the state of Washington who has that vision for connected government in the form of personas and journey maps and so on. So these are tricky barriers, right? They're not easily overcome by plugging in a new system or a new technology. That said, Jillian, I know there are examples of good in the world, and you have some of them. Why don't you go ahead and share them?
Yeah, absolutely. I pulled some examples more at the federal government or country level government, depending on the structure, um, that I think are really interesting. So the first that I'd like to share is Estonia. Estonia is interesting, and this is in Estonian. So if you don't read Estonian, I'll help translate some of this. But they really have organized their portal for their community around life events. And so across the top here, we have it says if you're sick, so you can go in there and get all the services you need if you're sick, having a baby, getting married, or if you're moving. And I think the moving one's really interesting because it's not just, hey, update your address here, but it's like, oh, do you need to find a new doctor in your area? And so it's connected to the life event rather than the agency structure. And I think that's really helpful. The other thing that I really like about the Estonian example is that the citizens retain ownership of their own data. So they're able to restrict and share the data they want, that I think is really important,
Yeah.
as we've talked about. Another example, Denmark. Denmark has an email portal that is available to everybody in Denmark. And really what is exciting to me about the Denmark example is this is a secure email. So we've talked about trust and security during the course of this conversation. And so Denmark's email system provides everybody with a secure way of communicating with the government. And it's not just between one agency, but you can also forward those emails to other agencies and just streamline the communication process. We've talked a lot about people wanting that individual to reach out to if they hit a barrier. And so when we talk to people in our research, they said, it's not just, I don't need somebody on the phone, although that's great. I don't need to walk into an office and talk to somebody face to face, although that's great. If I could just email somebody that knows, that would be great. Or if I could chat live with an individual, an actual person, that would be great as well. And so this email where it's secure, you can send protected information through it. That helps with some of those challenges and barriers around security and cross different agencies. Singapore also has a good example. So Singapore is really a leader in sort of the mobile first design. And in this case, they do no password required. So there's other ways of identifying the same way we'd get into other apps on our phone, for example. And again, sort of more organized around life events. And then the last example that I have for you is another mobile example, but in Ukraine, they've done a lot of work to get digital identity cards. And so you can imagine in situations that might be changing rapidly, losing your license could be a real big deal. And so having your license available on your phone to pull up has digital passport as well. And so it's just really digitized some of those things that we still have maintained more as a physical copy that I think is really exciting as well.
Yeah, these are super inspiring examples, and they're solving for some of the issues that you surfaced in your research, really reducing the need to navigate to multiple places, designing around a journey, like I'm moving or I'm starting a family and so on. I'm curious if you kind of step back and look across all these examples, Jillian's, are there some common themes? Anything they're doing differently that others can learn from?
Yeah, I think the way it seems to be moving based on the literature, the really asks of our community for where they want this to go is not just digitizing forms, not just recreating the bureaucratic structure online, but really re-envisioning the way government interacts with people. So reorganizing around the community and the community needs and the life events that we experience in plain language, in the language we want to use. And I think that's really where it seems to be going. And again, it's not so much a technical barrier, like you said. It's really a re-envisioning of how we offer services. But I think ultimately for this question, you might have more insight. This is something you work on, so I'd be curious to hear what you've seen, what you've heard about.
Yeah, I definitely have some takeaways and lessons learned working our team working with lots of government agencies to improve experiences, to make them more connected. I would say always start with the resident, not the technology. So take the time to understand the people you're serving. Do the research like you all did at Portland State. What is the end-to-end journey look like? Where are they getting stuck? Where are they dropping off, right? Where are they having to interface with multiple government agencies to complete one journey? Because people don't experience government one agency at a time. And so understanding that journey and maybe being able to visualize it creates this shared view of the problem and can bring agencies together around the solution and can help you create a vision for like what a seamless experience looks like. So that's number one. Start with understanding the people that are needing to use your services. The second one is start small and build from there. Get traction, build momentum. Don't try to solve everything at once and go out and build the perfect portal, because it's going to be a long way till you launch that, and there's a lot of stakeholdering and alignment you'll have to do to even put out that type of experience. So I would recommend pick one high stakes, high impact journey. Could be starting a business, could be applying for benefits. Start there and then build on that foundation and expand over time. And then the third one, and this one comes from just lessons learned out there that I've seen and experienced. Invest in people as much as in technology, right? Technology is only part of the transformation, but expecting that there is some kind of a silver bullet technology out there that automatically strings all these services together in one easy to use portal or experience is, I think, wishful thinking. I haven't seen it yet. And really sort of a mindset of thinking about connected government needing not a technical solution, but a new way of working across silos, across agencies, having that strong vision of what an easy to use experience looks like. And then shared ownership, governance, and leadership that's willing to bring people together around that vision or around that common goal. And I'll just say that I personally don't think that connected government should be called a project at any time, one that has a start date or a finish date. It's really a muscle that we're building, a new way of thinking, a new way of working across the silos, and keeping the resident at the center of it all. So definitely some, school of hard knocks there to arrive at some of those takeaways. I am seeing some questions in the chat, and let me see if I could pull that up. I'm very interesting. There's about 5 questions here to start with, and everyone in the audience, I'm going to start at the top and just work our way down the bottom. Thank you. Our first question is, how did you find or reach out for participation from disabled folks for the sampling? So this could be you, Carl, or Jillian. Either way who wants to tackle that question.
I can start. And then Carl, if you have other insights. So for our broad surveys, this actually, in an anonymous survey, you tend to get higher representation of people identifying as having a disability, because it's not going to be tied to a record. There's less fear involved in submitting that information. So for our surveys where they were anonymous, people actually disclosed over 20% of our respondents identified as having a disability. And so for those, we didn't need necessarily specific outreach, but we needed to create an environment in which people felt safe disclosing that information. And so we told them how we're going to use their data, how we're going to protect it, those types of things. And then we also did outreach specifically to community groups that work with the, people with disabilities. We reached out to organizations that support business leaders with disabilities. So people that are starting a business, there's organizations that work in that space. And so we really reached out to community organizations as well to get a more of that specific feedback. But for our broad surveys, it was really setting up that environment of safety and security. Anything else I missed, Carl?
Well, I think like you were saying, setting up the environment, our research benefited a lot from having focus groups online over the Zoom environment. So we tried to reduce as much barriers as we could to participating in interviews or focus groups, being more in person with us versus filling out a survey.
Yeah, so just reducing barriers for people with disabilities to take part in the research as well. Well done. Okay, how does the Lane and Lee 2011 e-government model relate to different levels of government in the United States? So city, county, state, federal. Where and how would those be represented? Within one or some of these, or as duplicates of the whole set? Excellent question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that the model would apply to any level of government. Those first two stages, cataloging and uh, working with another actor, what was that word again? Uh, they transaction, yes. So those two are within your level of government. They don't require interaction with other levels of government, and I think it's equally applicable for municipal, state, or national agencies. When you get into that vertical, then you're talking about now this is sharing an e-government service with multiple different. So, something at a municipal level is shared with the state government, something at the state level is shared with the national government. So that vertical level requires um, the interactions. I don't know. I assume most uh, large city municipal governments are all on e-government websites, have services. It's possible that really small towns haven't even set up any internet services. I'm not sure. Yeah, and then horizontal again goes back to just whatever level of government you're at and integrated within those agencies. Um, so yeah, there could be sort of duplicated um, functions of these different levels. But I think our federal system is pretty good at distributing those different. You go to the city for different things than you go to the state or the national level.
Thank you, Carl. So is it, oops, went away. Is it fair to say that it's at that vertical level that information would flow across the different levels of government, federal, state, local? Okay, great.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that question and the answer. How open are states like Oregon to use Login.gov, which is the federal credential that many residents already use to access multiple federal services like Social Security? Are we there yet, or are politics standing in our way? Curious.
I do not have the answer to this one. Yeah, I don't have the answer. How open? I think the initial and this is just my perspective. I'm not speaking for the state of Oregon at all when I'm answering this, but I feel like the initial push seems to be in the patterns that I've seen across different governments, seems to be that an internal solution. So moving from multiple agency sign-ons to a single sign-on rather than integrating with another level of government as the first step. So state of Oregon still has multiple sign-ons for different agencies. So we're still beyond that first step. Yeah.
Yeah. So starting at the state level with creating a single sign-on experience, and then perhaps in the future we integrate with login.gov. I'm curious if the person who asked this question knows of any other states that are already lining up with login.gov, or even for state services, you would go there. So if you have an answer, feel free to put that in there.
Well, and on that, I would wonder, especially with current events, if a lot of states are hesitant to integrate more with the national government in sharing data. There are uh, political reasons always to do that or to remain more autonomous. And that would seem to be a really difficult thing to unentangle once you've done it. So I'm sure there's a lot to weigh in that question than just, wouldn't it be nice to have the one sign on?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Carl. And I get it's to the politics barrier that we talked about. There
Hmm.
are certainly tension between states and federal. So great point. And then I see a note here that perhaps California has started looking into this to integrate with Login.gov, but not sure how wide the adoption is. So we'll check that out. All right. Our next question is, we know many users overwhelmingly use mobile phones, but do some of these passwordless systems work with a less tech-savvy user who is accustomed to and trusts using a password on their laptop or desktop? Usability is not just for the majority, so how would they serve their less tech-savvy users?
Yeah, I think this goes back to kind of the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about, and you brought it actually back in at the end. It's really about knowing the users and who you're serving. And so when we did our research, we had four distinct user groups, one of which was non-users due to trust concerns. And so they may not be the first ones to access these resources using a mobile phone. However, are other users that have accessibility barriers. Maybe they don't have great fiber internet, but they can get a 5G connection or something along those lines on a mobile phone. It would really serve those users. And so I think it's really understanding the different segments that you're serving and offering different solutions for those different barriers. So I 100% agree with this comment. I don't think everybody would just jump on board if they did, especially if they had concerns about trust and wanted a little bit more security, feeling more secure with just a password on their laptop. How do we also serve that group would be a question I have. Yeah.
Yeah, well said, Jillian. It's not one solution serves all, and it starts with understanding what are the unique needs that people have so that you can tailor solutions to those needs. So well said. Any additions from you, Carl, on that one?
Well, and I think this is one that better technology from the government end could help because there shouldn't be an either or, right? You should be able to develop for both mobile experience and not saying a regular desktop design website is going away either. That should be a both, I would assume, with the right technical background.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Certainly, your research shows that that would serve one audience well and another not. So I think staying flexible and customizing the solutions, which again starts with understanding people's needs. Here's another great question. Like so many things that are digitized, the concern slash distrust that seems to arise most often is, how do you protect my information? With so many things being made available over the digital platform, how do we prove we can mitigate, prevent identity theft, data breaches, and other data security risks?
Yeah, I think this is a real concern. And as a researcher, the term prove it becomes really challenging. But so I'm going to move away from prove, but how can we mitigate? I think is the question I'll answer. Um, and we have actually asked this question of a lot of our respondents, and we asked, what makes you feel secure on a website? Some of the people said they look for .gov, they look for the little lock icon in the address bar. People said if there was typos, it makes them nervous. Um, a uniform branding made people feel more secure. And then people also really wanted to be able to find the information. They wanted to be able to see how are you protecting my security? They wanted a write-up, and they wanted that write-up accessible. So that's how people said they were checking security, and what would make them feel more comfortable. Um, and I'm just rereading the question. And I do think this is a risk in the modern world. So how do we mitigate it and sort of acknowledge that that is something that can happen and convey to our communities, here is what we're doing. Here, when you're submitting this information, this is really where that's going. And giving people the autonomy to direct their data a little bit. Do you want it to go to this agency? Do you not? So I think that's a really important component of this as well. Sorry, one more thing that's coming to mind on this is we also asked people about their general level of trust of government, as well as their level of trust with online government resources. And people who, in particular, didn't trust government in general also had lower trust of the online resources. So it goes beyond just an e-government problem. So it's building trust in government generally. But people did say once they were able to find the information they were looking for, they found it to be reliable. So I think it's broader than the online platforms, but that's some of the questions we asked about it. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting insights all coming from that research. Yeah, and I think trust is something that we need to earn over time, sort of one touch point, one transaction at a time. And there's room for improvement there, I'd say, for most of us. I'm gonna head us to, I think, the last question here, although everyone in the audience, feel free to keep adding them. This person says, I feel like for Washington State, we are at all of those different levels at the model for different tasks. For some tasks, we're still accepting PDFs. In others, we are integrated across agency and federal governments. Any advice on if we should focus on making all PDFs into online two-way forms before we start integration, or should we continue to prioritize vertical horizontal integration based on tasks before worrying about those PDF forms that aren't used frequently?
Yeah, that's really interesting that the different tasks have different levels on that stage or interacting at different degrees and cooperating. I guess I'd be curious, was there a different mandate for that task specifically to have the full integration versus was there a mandate for all of the government to do that and it's just kind of progressed at different paces? You said some of the tasks aren't used as frequently and that's why they're still on PDF forms. Yeah, was that a kind of a lower priority that didn't get the attention? Um, but yeah, it seems like the Washington system is moving towards that integration. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a hard to answer broadly.
I think it's a tricky prioritization challenge, right?
Mhm.
Like, we have so much to do and not enough time and money to do it all and do it well. So that, I think, our best strategy is to prioritize again those key journeys. And if there are PDFs on that journey that are currently form based, fill it out, send it in type of thing, then I would say go ahead and turn it into a transaction. For the other PDFs that are not part of a critical user journey to accomplish a task, I would deprioritize them, not because they're not important or shouldn't eventually make their way into a transaction. It's just there's not enough time and money to do it all. And so, use that as a forcing mechanism to figure out what the key journeys are. There's also a cost to having inaccessible PDFs online where we're having to have the same conversations. So many PDFs, we need to make them accessible. Is there enough time and money to do that? Yeah, we would love to. but we've got to prioritize what's most important to the resident to help them accomplish those key journeys. No easy answer. Appreciate the complexity of that question. All right. Well, unless there are other questions, we love them. Thank you so much for sharing those with you. I'm going to start winding us down here, and I want to leave you all with one final thought, which is that connected government, which we've been talking about today, this idea of a frictionless, easy to use service that doesn't require people to understand the inner workings of government, is not going to be possible by just investing in technology, right? It happens when we understand that full journey people are trying to accomplish, whether it's starting a business or retiring or moving. It takes agencies to work together to design that journey together. And that takes a shared vision, strong leadership, collaboration, and willingness to put the resident at the center of the decision. I'll add to that, it also takes prioritization. Please be on the lookout next week. We are going to be sending the recording, some additional resources, as well as information if you're interested in complimentary office hours to continue the conversation here today. And I want to send a special thank you to Carl and Jillian for sharing your research and your insights with us today. And thank you for everyone in the room for all that you're doing to improve public services. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you.